Hello, I'm Bob the Bookerer and welcome to my channel. And we're now roughly halfway through the year, just after halfway through the year. And so I thought it might be a nice time to look back at some of my reading goals that I've had for the year and how I'm getting on with them. The answer being not quite as well as I thought I might be, but there are mitigating factors and we'll talk about those. But either way, I mean, reading isn't about goals or having to read certain things at certain times. And even though I've often structured a lot of my reading, unfortunately, like that. But yeah, either way, I'm going to talk a little bit about how that's going, but also what I'm thinking about for reading for the rest of the year. So let's get started talking a little bit about that. So first up, the mitigating factor really has been this prize reading. If I haven't mentioned it enough, I am one of the judges for the debut category for the Polari Prize this year, which is very, very exciting and was obviously not something I had on my goals or whatever for the year. I did not know this was coming. And this is fab because this is something I've wanted to do for many, many years. So that's been very exciting. But reading an additional 50 books has somewhat knocked sideways the other reading I've been doing. However, I have now read the books from the long list, which is very exciting. The long list should be coming out very shortly, which is also very exciting. It's wild to think that we've selected these books. Yeah, that's fun. And so now that all that really leaves is rereading that long list to create a short list, rereading that shortlist to create a winner. And that's I say only, but that is what remains for what I need to do for the prize, which is very, very exciting. However, the other reading goals I had this year are still very much up in the air. And up in the air in a good way, as in that they're still happening, not who knows, although there is an aspect of who knows going on with this as well. Two of those being that I really wanted to finally get round to reading Beloved by Toni Morrison and Susanna Clarke's Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, neither of which I have started at all this year, but I now have a lot of holiday in the second half of the year, so we shall see. This video will be going out while I'm on holiday, so I may well have taken one of these books with me. Potentially this, although this is such a heavy book that I don't know if I want to be lugging that around on a sort of backpack trip. Anyway, but I'm really, really excited to read these two and Panenka by Ronan Hession as well. Those were three of the books I really wanted to get round to this year, where I've loved other books by these authors, and these feel like the kind of classic ones of their type that I really, really want to read. Classic books by this author. These authors. So that's one thing. And the other thing being the Booker Prize. So I started my channel 5 years ago, almost, which is wild, 5 years ago with the goal of reading all of the shortlisted books from the Booker Prize. I somewhat got deviated away from that. I think if I'd just focused on it, I could have probably done it in a couple of years, but I ended up reading everything else instead, which has been great. Would not knock that. I'm very glad that I have done that, but it has meant that I'm slightly off with that goal. However, I think I'm now into, I think it's under 20 definitely that I've got left to read now, and we're getting very, very close. It's now getting to the point where there are quite a few years where I've only got 1 or 2 books left to read, and that's the shortlist. So more of that should be coming. And I don't think I'll finish in time for the Booker long list announcement, but it will come at some point this year. So that's really exciting. That's coming along. And I almost don't know what I will do with myself after that. I mean, I'll find something else, as evidenced by the fact that over the last 5 years, I've read everything else apart from that. But it's kind of a weird thing to think about, having to get to the end of that project. That was a big reason for why I started the channel in the first place. And yeah, that's all very exciting. So that's good. That's coming. And actually, sort of, not to add more projects to myself, but kind of to add more projects to myself, I'd also sort of been flirting with the idea of reading the shortlist from the International Booker, which fortunately has far fewer years to catch up on. And actually, I'm in a similar place with that, I think, of about 20 odd books. So it may well be that both get finished by the end of the year as well, which would be wild. I'm still trying to make sure that I give these books the proper love and time that they need. I think that's part of why I didn't end up doing this in 2 years, because that would have been a real rush of not really reading anything else and getting somewhat burnt out by the idea of mandatory reading, and that doesn't feel quite as fun. So I think that was the right decision in the long run, but I think at the same time, it now means that I have these moments where I'm like, oh gosh, there's still a few kicking around. But like I said at the beginning of the video, reading shouldn't be about goals and all of those sorts of things, even though I find that I end up leaning that way, and I have to really pull myself back away from it. So reading for the rest of the year looks a little bit more joyous because there are some prizes where I'm going to be reading the shortlists for them anyway. So I'm just finishing off reading the Orwell Prize shortlist at the moment. We've got the Goldsmiths still to be announced later this year, which is one of my favourites. We've obviously got the Booker. We've got so many other prizes. The Polari, I will be really excited to read the non-debut list because I have no idea currently what's on it. So actually I'll just see the long list for that and have some fun books to read there as well. Yeah, so it's all very exciting. Lots of good things with reading, and it feels, after having had a few months at the beginning of the year where I really struggled to pick up books, I'm now kind of back in the zone. Long may it survive, long may it go. And I'm about to be on holiday, and that also means for my reading, and particularly my year has been very front-loaded work-wise and life-wise, which means so much of the second half of my year is holiday. I said quite a, like, I've really accidentally front-loaded this year. So I've got a lot of time where I think I'm going to be able to really sit back and enjoy some reading for Bob. Some proper joyful reading, of which I think something like Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell and Beloved will be part of that, of just really big solid reads that I don't have any specific timeline to read to, or I don't necessarily have to review them, or or they'll probably want to, but there's nothing else that really ties these down in the sense of being on a prize list or whatever, but exciting regardless. So yeah, that's a very rambly way of saying I'm very excited for the second half of this year, where I'm going to be able to read quite a lot for pleasure. But that doesn't mean that I haven't had a lot of books already this year that I think will be right up there for me in terms of my favourites. So let's do a very quick recap on some books that I think will be up there at the end of year as being some of my reads of the year. First up, a book that I was a little sort of later to, but had been meaning to read for a while, Question 7 by Richard Flanagan, which I read right towards the beginning of this year, and I still think about quite often. It's a book where Richard Flanagan it's a non-fiction book, but told in a very narrative style, where he draws a line between his father's experience in a Japanese prisoner of war camp, the creation of nuclear weapons, and a broader sort of state of the world. And I think this is just such a genius piece of writing, and I don't know how he's constructed something like this. I just think it's sublime. On a similar note, David Chaloy's Flesh, I think, is incredible. I will not be surprised if this book makes it to various prize lists this year. I think this is a really stunning piece of writing around particularly a very lonely and isolated man in some ways, but there's also a sense where form and function really fit, and the book is told in this very interesting style, because it's essentially told in a very clipped, blunt way that in many ways mirrors this man's outer sort of presence. It's almost like he is telling you the book, and he's written it himself in that way, because he's just a very taciturn and very simple language kind of man. He doesn't really beat around the bush. He just says some things and falls silent for a while, and I really loved the way the book played with that. A couple as well from the International Booker Prize longlist this year. The first being Ibtisam Azem's The Book of Disappearance, translated by Sinan Antoun, which I just think is a really phenomenal piece of writing that very much looks down the barrel of the gun. It is about a sort of imagined situation where overnight every single Palestinian person disappears, and then what kind of remains of society trying to understand firstly what's happened and how quickly things go into a very scary place where people start becoming incredibly distrustful and where lots of societal things collapse. I think this is such a bold and imaginative piece of writing. And it really just blew me away when I read it. And I think similarly, in a very, very different style, the first two volumes of On the Calculation of Volume by Solveig Balla and translated by Barbara J. Havland. And I just think this is such phenomenal writing. It's so brilliant how she takes this idea of somebody repeating the same day over and over and finds nuances and intelligent points to make about relationships and memory and the state of the world and so many other things through this. I think these are truly phenomenal pieces of writing. And last but not least, two books that I've covered as solo reviews recently. Sarah Moss with Ripeness, a book that traces a family history and particularly looks at the various complicated overlaps between bits of history. So particularly a woman who watches as her sister gives up a son for adoption, and the various ways that the family dynamic is forever shifted. But it also does something so interesting about family legacy, and particularly family legacy through the eyes of a Jewish family just after World War II, and then traces a line to current day events, and particularly Ukrainian refugees, and makes this kind of really intelligent point and really beautiful point about the ways that we do and don't accept certain types of people as being quote unquote legitimate based on where they're from. And I think this book is just so intelligent and and thoughtful, and I just really loved it. And I think it's up there as one of my books of the year, definitely already. And then on top of that, Rasheen O'Donnell's Nesting, a book about a woman going through incredibly difficult circumstances. It's just a really affecting book, I think. It's a woman who's dealing with particularly emotional abuse, but many other things going into it, with a horrible partner and there's a visceral feeling throughout the book of how much you realize you hate this character of Ryan. But the book is about how she does pretty much anything and everything to keep her children safe. And although aspects of that book, that's a story that's been told many times, there's something really fresh about the way she writes this, and particularly uses it as a critique of a society that doesn't provide the infrastructure that actually makes it even harder for people to leave. So, for example, rents being sky high or work being precarious, and the various ways that those affect people's ability to leave difficult situations. I think it's such an insightful and commanding debut, and I'm so excited to see what else she writes. And last but not least, I can't seem to find my copy. It is somewhere in this room. This room is a tip, because it is also full of Polari Judge reading books. But somewhere in this room is Human Animal by Seth Insua, which I just think is a phenomenal piece of writing. And again, a really assured debut, particularly about a complicated relationship between a father and his child, whose name and identity changes a bit throughout the book. But we start with them as Tom in the book. We end up with them as Tam, who's non-binary, and particularly the key conversation at the heart of the book is around a generational difference between father and child, and particularly where ethics and experiences also clash. So the father running a farm, Tam realizing that they don't want to be part of this and perhaps feel that it is an exploitative practice, and then the discussion that happens and reaches a fever pitch when essentially a social media campaign and a set of activists clash over this exact thing. So it's a really fantastic book as well, and with so much heart and intelligence, and I just thought this was so beautiful. So yeah, all of these are books that I have been absolutely adoring so far this year. I'm sure there'll be plenty more, because the nature of the beast is always that so many more books will be coming out later this year, and particularly, we've not even hit some of the peak parts yet, and there are many books that I am really looking forward to. I think some I know are also potential Booker contenders, but we'll see. Ian McEwan has a new book out, and actually the early reviews seem to suggest that it's a very good one of his. I've had a bit of a mixed thing with his last couple, but Ian McEwan at his best is such a phenomenal writer that I'm excited to see what comes from it as well. So we shall see. There are plenty of other books that I will be keeping an eye out for. In fairness, I'm also a little bit unaware of what is really coming out from other people. There will be plenty of other things that will be beautiful surprises, and I'm very excited for them, particularly because with some of the reading projects potentially ending before too long, I may have a little bit more time to really sit back and enjoy them. But anyway, these have been some of the books that I've been really enjoying so far, and some of my plans for the rest of the year in terms of reading. I hope you are being kind to yourself with your reading goals. It does not matter if you have not hit them. These are suggestions rather than necessities. But yeah, I'm hoping you're having a great time with whatever you're reading either way. And we've still got a few big prizes and a few big releases, I'm sure, to come. But yes, take care. Let me know if any books you're really looking forward to reading. And I hope you have a fantastic bit of reading and hopefully not a too melty summer like we are having here. Take care and speak to you all soon. Bye-bye. Also, very side thing, I've hit 6,000 subscribers, which is nuts. That happened and I didn't actually realise until somebody pointed it out in a comment. So thank you, commenter, because I had missed that entirely. That's lovely. Thank you. Hello, new people, and hello, people who have been here forever. Really appreciate it. That is wild. I will eventually do some kind of thing about that. But I really appreciate it. And it's fun to be here for, well, just a smidge under 5 years. I think 5 years in November, with you all. So thank you and take care, everybody. Bye-bye.